Hi everybody, my name is Hannah, this is Pepper and Pine, and I have a physics lesson to share with you today. We're working through our Waldorf curriculum by Live Education, and this is the introduction to heat, light, and sound. Today we're going to be working with shadows, and this is a lesson for our optics portion of this main lesson block. And we're going to be using our charcoals in order to focus on the shadows that are created by different kinds of objects. So I am going to draw the light that is on my desk, and you can see a little shadow peeking at the top left corner. And that is for a ball that we're going to be drawing and adding the shadow for. This lesson had to be done in the evening where the shadows of the objects were very clear. And so we waited until dusk in order to do this lesson. And then we pulled a few different objects that were around our schoolroom in order to do this lesson. Now, this proportion and this angle is not quite right. As soon as I get my other objects in this illustration, you can see that the light source works great for the one object, but the shadow wasn't exactly correct for the other ones. And so when you're doing this, I would suggest that you put all of the objects that you are going to be using for shadows and for your illustration together in one space, and then having your one spotlight on them so that you can really see where your shadows each lie on the table. I did use a little bit of chalk in order to color in the background and give it a little bit of shading and dimension. And then I constructed a little cone in order to do this next shadow. And we were trying to use different objects that we can see the shadows that each of those objects produces. So you can see at this point I've kind of run out of space unless I want to go onto the other page with my shadow, but the cone creates a triangular shadow, which was really interesting to see. And I did have my eraser in order to help erase extra lines or things that weren't quite right once I added the light source to our object, and I was surprised that the eraser worked so well. So if you end up with some charcoal in places that you didn't expect, usually an eraser will help remove that. So now I want to do one more object so that we can see sort of a difference in these different objects and the shadows that they produce. So I have a tall rectangular block, and I would like to put it at the lower part of my illustration, but I've already put a line where the desk is supposed to end, and so I'm going to need to erase that whole line so that I can get my shadow in for this block. And also we're using vertical orientation for our main lesson book, but for an illustration like this, a horizontal format might have been a little bit easier so that you can get all of your objects in. So you can see that the shadow for this last one is really going in the wrong direction. And I really wanted to accentuate what the shadow looked like. And the edges are actually a little bit more blurred than the way that I did them. They are not sharp edges when it comes to this particular block. And so at the end, it was important to sort of merge the shadow and sort of use my fingers just to kind of blur it a little bit so that it gave it a more realistic look in the end. We really enjoyed this lesson tremendously. We even found that the following morning when we needed to do touch-ups to our illustration, we were able to use our light source and get a pretty good shadow even though it was daytime. I hope that you enjoyed this look at our physics lesson. Don't forget to check out the blog post that accompanies this video for more information, as well as links to all of the resources that we're using for this main lesson block. You can find that link down in the description box below. And if you'd like to see how we're homeschooling on a daily basis, you can find me on Instagram and now on TikTok at Pepper and Pine.